Welcome to the Israel Information Meeting. We usually do one of these, and then we film it so that if you have friends or relatives or people who are interested, they can click online. More than half the people come from other states because we put it out at Search the Scripture. So it's really a fun trip because you meet people from all over the country, believers who love Christ. And so Israel tour, September 8th through 18th. Usually we go twice in one of two segments of the year, either May or September. There's a reason no one really goes to Israel in July and August because it is so hot. And it can still be warm in May or in September. But those are really good times typically to go. What's it like? Typically in September, it's very much like South Carolina. It will often mimic the climate. It will be a little cooler, though, in Jerusalem, which is kind of the high point geographically that we'll visit. But other than that, it's usually sometimes. We've been there and we've had 75-degree, cool, no humidity days. And humidity is not a big problem in Israel. That's more of a South Carolina thing. So it's low humidity. Although when you go to the Dead Sea, that's the lowest part physically below the face of the earth, below sea level, and it's very warm down there. But it's a great place. There's also a place to get in the water and float. But if you'll open this up, day one is just to depart, and so there is a closure date to the trip. I don't have the exact date, but it used to be that the airlines would go 120 days out before you had to lock in, but not anymore. I should say they used to go like 60 days out. Now it's like 120 days out. So the registration will probably close around the 1st of June. So it's a short window for people to sign up. But we'll fly to Israel, Ben Gurion Airport. The first day we'll go to Caesarea by the Sea. There's two Caesareas in the Bible. And we'll go to actually both of them. And Caesarea by the Sea is a very important place. It was a place where Paul spent some time in prison. It's a place where Philip the Evangelist lives. It's a place where Cornelius was born again and saved. And it's a magnificent historical spot. That same day we'll go to the top of Mount Carmel, where Elijah confronted the 450 prophets of Baal, the 400 prophets of the Asherah. We'll go to a Druze village for lunch. The Druze people are an interesting people. They're kind of a blend of Judaism and Islam, but a unique religion in and of itself. They are Israeli citizens. They'll fight in the Israeli wars representing Israel. They're lost, but we'll sometimes meet some Druze people. There's usually about 3 regions that the Druze will live in. We'll go to Cana of Galilee, Nazareth, to Mount Precipice. There's really only one geographical spot where the time when they wanted to throw Jesus off of a cliff could have taken place. So that's what we'll call a Class A spot. We'll go to some places and we say, oh, this is a Class A spot. You're on the spot. We'll say, this is a Class B. It could have happened 100 yards that way or 300 yards that way. We're in the general area. We don't know exactly. Class C is, who knows? And we don't spend much time going to Class C spots. But we'll point them out that some will herald as a tradition. Some we will go to. On day 4, you can see we'll be in the Galilee region. And we'll be on the Mount of Beatitudes where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. And that's an amazing place in terms of the geography. And even Hebrew University has done studies there where a person's voice, in terms of the way God created it, would carry like you're in a big arena with microphones. We'll go to the Golan Heights, and that's important militarily. We'll go to Caesarea Philippi. That's a second Caesarea. And that was the place where Jesus was encountering all these different questions people were asking. Who do men say that I am? And of course, Peter will confess, you're the Christ. That happens at Caesarea Philippi. Why did he choose that spot to ask that question? Very, very significant. We'll go to Tel Dan, if you remember at one point. We'll go to some Old Testament sites too. The kingdom split north and south. And there's the 10 northern tribes and the 2 southern tribes. And in Dan and Beersheba, they had places of worship. And we'll actually go to the place where they literally worshiped. Sadly, pagan worship. But we'll tell the story and what happened. That's a Class A spot. We know it happened there. The whole archaeological find there shouts it. Also have a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee. We always go with a Messianic Jew. He has 2 boats, but we reserve him like a year in advance, and he's already locked in. His name is Daniel Carmel, and he'll tell his testimony of how he found Christ and sing, and it will be an interesting evening. We'll go to Magdala, one of the oldest synagogues completely, nearly intact, has been found in Magdala, and that spot just opened up maybe 5 or 6 years ago. We'll actually stay in a hotel right over the archaeological spot, and of course Mary of Magdala is from there. We'll go to Tabgha. That's an Aramaic word that means 7 springs, so the place of the 7 springs. And there's 2 Bethsaidas. There's one on one side of the Sea of Galilee, such they're in Bethsaida, and they go to Bethsaida. You say, we'll cover this in Mark's gospel because there's 2 Bethsaidas. And we'll go to the Bethsaida where Jesus called the disciples, and they're fishing. And it's the same Bethsaida where after Easter, it's not that they quit and, forsook the ministry, but they're doing what Jesus said, go in the Galilee and wait. And so they go up into Galilee, and they're at Bethsaida, and they're fishing, and there's another miracle catch that had happened earlier in the public ministry of Christ. We'll go to Gideon Springs, and then we're going to log a lot of time in Jerusalem. You can see on day 6, we'll be on the Mount of Olives, one of my favorite spots, really, because it was a place in which Jesus ascended to heaven from, and it's a place that he will literally physically return to. The Mount of Olives would be like if I was up in the baptismal, and then you come down, and this is the Kidron Valley, and there's the Temple Mount up there. So the Temple Mount is right across from the Mount of Olives. We'll go to the Palm Sunday Road. We'll walk down it when Jesus came on a donkey into Jerusalem. The Garden of Gethsemane, that's at the base of the Mount of Olives. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, we go to that. It's a Class C spot. I guarantee nothing happened there, what they said happened there. But in the Roman Catholic theology, they say that's where Golgotha was. We'll go to what people call Gordon's Calvary, and I'll go through 15 reasons why it could not have happened at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and why it happened outside the gate at the spot we will be at. We'll also go to the southern steps. That was a major entrance as you ascended up into the Temple Mount. We'll talk about the 15 steps that Jewish people walked up and what they did on each step. And we'll go into the Jewish quarter. We'll go into the rabbinical tunnels, and they keep expanding and broadening. So sometimes when you're in a place like Jerusalem and you look down, say, at the Pool of Bethesda, and you say, what's it doing way down there? Because that was street level 2,000 years ago. And so remember, Jerusalem was conquered 18 different times. And so these tells, you know what a tell is? A tell is like an artificial mountain. And so we've been, like before, not on this trip, to Tel Megiddo. And it was a place where, it was conquered, and then all the stones and everything, were fallen, and they built on top of that, and on top of that, and on top of that, and it kind of created an artificial mountain. And there's places like that. When you go to a place that's, several thousand years old, you'll see things like that. But the rabbinical tunnels, like most of you have seen the Western Wall, and we'll go there. We're going to hit all the major spots. But when you look at the Western Wall, what's visible, that's the retaining wall for the Temple Mount. So when Jesus said not one stone will be upon another, he's not talking about the retaining wall. He's talking about what was up on top of it, the temple. And a lot of the original stones that go back to the time of King Herod the Great, are still there. And when you go down into the rabbinical tunnels, you discover that most of the wall is actually below the ground. And you'll walk through those tunnels, and you'll see a stone. You'll see, for instance, one stone that's from here, literally, to that camera. That's how long one stone is, and it's about 6 feet wide, and it's about 6 feet thick. One stone. How did they get it there? This was all part of the retaining wall in which the temple would be built. We'll go to Yad Vashem. That's the Holocaust Museum. The original one, Washington, D.C. tried to mimic it, but really this is the most accurate one. And I mean, I hate to say it, not to criticize D.C., but it doesn't hold a candle if you can speak of it in those terms, because it's kind of a sad place to go, but it's a reality of human history. And we are planning, Lord willing, to have Hanak Teller, a rabbi, give us a personal tour through it. So Yad Vashem can be very overwhelming in terms of when you see what happened at the Holocaust, but it's a reminder of the hatred of the Jews that has never stopped since God formed them as a nation, and is actually going to reach a greater height years down the road during the time of the Great Tribulation period. 6 million Jews died, of course, in the Holocaust. If the Holocaust or if the tribulation were to happen today, the numbers would be much larger. 10 million Jews would be dead. If there's 15 million Jews in the world, 10 million are going to die. 2/3, the prophet Zechariah says, during that 7-year period known as the Great Tribulation. All the nations of the world are going to go against Israel. But when we go to Yad Vashem, it is overwhelming. But Hanak Teller, how many of you remember Hanak? He came here on 2 occasions. Yeah, so he spoke, and he's written a lot of books on the Holocaust and other subjects. He's a rabbi. He's open. He's open to the Lord. In fact, he's read David Limbaugh's book on the resurrection. He's read Mere Christianity. So he's open, very open. And someday, again, there's going to be this influx of Jewish people who are going to come and acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah, but he'll personally take us through. I had one guide with me one time, and he said to me, Pastor Carl, I've been through here. He's a Jewish man. He said, I've been through over 200 times as a guide. He said, this is the single best tour I've ever had, ever. So Hanak, when you see some picture, he'll say, well, let me tell you about this lady in the picture. And it just kind of brings it home because he knows who these people are. He did hundreds and hundreds, thousands of hours of research on them. We'll go to the Garden Tomb where Jesus was resurrected. We'll go on day 9 down to the Jordan River to the spot where they crossed, the Jewish people. Now, the Jordan River has been greatly shrunk from its original banks just because, one, the Israeli people irrigate like few other people. But I have a picture that I showed when we walked through the Revelation of the Jordan River where it's a mile wide in the very spot that we're going to go when it was at flood stage, a mile wide. Today it will be like from here to that camera and the spot that we're going to go and baptize at. So we'll actually be at the spot where they crossed. It's a Class A spot, and right in that area where Jesus himself was baptized. I don't know if it was 50 feet this way or 50 feet that way, but it's right here on this side of the Jordan. We'll go to the Elah Valley. We'll discuss King David and his encounter with Saul. We'll go to Jaffa, Jaffa also called Joppa, where, of course, Jonah had his flight from. There'll be a farewell dinner. So we'll see the Dead Sea Scrolls. I skipped that. En-Gedi, the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is an important place to go to. Not just because you can float in it, but when you see the Dead Sea and how dead it is, and you realize there's coming a day when people are going to fish in it. That's what God says. People are going to literally fish in the Dead Sea. It's going to come back to life. You say, wow, that's a miracle. So I'm not going to bore you with all the details. You can read those. $5,997. It used to be about $1,000 cheaper 10, 12 years ago. And so you might find a cheaper trip, but I doubt it. And if you do, you got to be careful what you're paying for. I went on a trip. Of course, I was for free because I was a speaker with an organization called Passages, and they asked me to come and teach graduate students and from a law school. And so I went and had about 50 graduate students. But we stayed like in maybe Motel 6s, where like the walls were paper thin, and kibbutzes and different places like that. And so they paid like $4,000 to go as graduate students. Again, you often get what you pay for. Sometimes you'll see a trip and it doesn't include the meals. So this includes every meal. Every meal is included, every tip's included, you don't tip, everything's taken care of from A to Z. Read the fine print. The only thing that I would be concerned about is if someone asked me going out the door this morning, do you have to pay it all at once? No. But there is a drop dead date where you have to have it paid by, but there's an initial $500 registration fee. And so if you back out, you lose your $500. So I just want you to be clear on that. Because they begin a process with the Israeli government that they make sure that you're not a terrorist. And so there's certain expenses they have along with their staff and everything else. And so you'd lose that $500. If for some reason you backed out and you wanted to go later on, they would apply it later on. Occasionally, I think we had one person who at the last minute had major health problems. Now that person bought travel insurance and they got a full refund. But you can take the trip and defer it later on. And that's what happened to us during COVID. We were scheduled to go at a particular time, and then COVID came in at high speed, and Israel was locked down and we couldn't go. And so it was rearranged and delayed, but eventually we went. Of course, we were there in 2023, 3 weeks before October the 7th. People ask, is it safe? A common question. It's about as safe as America, I think, in some respects. I mean, Israelis, other than down at the Gaza Strip, haven't been dying. There's been one or two that had some errant rockets, but there are, bomb shelters and everything. I don't expect to spend any time in a bomb shelter with you, but I suppose if I were to die, Israel wouldn't be a bad place to go from. But I say all that it's generally safe. In fact, we hear about this happened in Israel or that happened in Israel. It happens every day in America. People are murdered and slaughtered, and it's just a bigger nation, and it's spread out a little bit more. But they're not going to let us go to a place that is unsafe. If there's some disruption, we just won't go there. So that's the reality of it. I hope and pray by God's grace that it will be even better than it is today. People have been going for the last 3 months. So the organization that I went and represented called Passages, they've been over there for the last 6 months doing tours. They're taking, 50 to as many as 1,000 students at a time, depending on when it is. So I would say it's safe, and now all the travel agencies have opened wide open. In fact, if the trip were to get over 60, we won't be able to take people because all the hotels are already booked. So generally, you go out a year in advance. And so initially, we thought, I had set the dates for May of last year. And then, like I say, and I set those right after we had gotten back. I usually go about every 18 months. And then, October the 7th came. So we've rescheduled, but now it's just about full for September. So there's going to be thousands of tourists. How big are the tourist industry? Usually about 300,000 people a day are in Israel visiting. So it's a huge industry. But they have got the most sophisticated, computerized system of who's at what spot when. It's not like, well, let's go over to so-and-so. No, it's scheduled. You go, they've got a spot for your bus. I mean, it's all like scheduled because they don't want you to have an unpleasant experience. So it's very, very well done. The Jewish people are some of the brightest people in the world. And I'm bragging on them now, but it's just true. I went to a high school that was 50% Jewish. And some of those kids were bright, and it was fun because it was good, healthy competition. But they do some things that are just outstanding. And so that's the long and the short of it. Anybody have any particular questions? And by the way, if you have questions, you can call the church, and Pastor Josh will answer your questions. So if you have any questions at all, people will typically, and after 2 people sign up, we'll do like a meeting in preparation. And 2, we'll be communicating with those who do sign up about everything that you want to begin to do. Here's the biggest thing, anyone listening, is you have to be able to walk. So if you are physically handicapped, you can't come. You say, how far? Well, you're walking. If you can't walk 10,000 steps a day right now, you're not going to enjoy yourself. Now, I've had people who, 10,000 steps is not all that much. See, I'll tell you what I have, right? I have 2,577, and I've been in this building since 6:20 this morning, so I haven't done many steps, or there, 26:01, it just updated. But 10,000 steps a day. If you can do 10,000 steps a day, you'll be great. But here's what happens is if you're not in condition, because you might get off the bus and you walk 300 yards to the site, and you walk 300 yards back. And if you're not in condition, you've done fine day 1, day 2, you're hurting day 3. It's like, I'm exhausted. So it looks like most of you are in good condition, so I don't think that will be a factor, but that is something you have to consider. It's not like when you get off the bus and you walk 10 feet, or you sit in the bus and you watch it. You're moving around, but it's really fun because you're there in the land seeing the sights firsthand. Some questions? Yes, Danny.
So what about attire? Like if you're going into a certain place, are there restrictions?
Yeah, in terms of dress, yeah, and we'll fine-tune all this, but it's a good question. There are some places where you can't wear shorts. So generally speaking, you're in long pants during the day, unless we're down at the Dead Sea and we know we're not going to any Catholic spots. The Catholics bought up a lot of the properties in Israel. That's how they raise money. And so they managed the spots. And so like we were in Tabgha. That was the place where Jesus said, follow me. And they left their nets and they followed him. And that was the place after Easter. That's a Catholic spot. And so I told the people, and I remember I had long pants, and like 3 people on the last trip showed up in shorts. And they said, no, you're not allowed in. And so they had to go back to the bus, pull their suitcases out, change. It was just really a turmoil. So generally speaking, long pants, short sleeves. If a woman goes into a site, she has to have her shoulders covered. She can't have it up to here. It's just kind of like going into the Vatican in Rome. Very similar in that respect. Now, not all the spots are obviously Roman Catholic, but if we go to 8 or 9 spots in a day and 3 of them are Roman Catholic, then you're going to be disqualified from being able to get in that spot if you're not dressed properly. You don't need a tie, no need for a tie, but yeah, good question. Yes?
Can you upgrade the flights?
You can. So, and there's a land-only price in here. Some people have points, and I think you save like $1,000 or something. It's not dramatic. But you can upgrade your flight, and some people have points and they want to upgrade to first class, or yeah, you can do that. And that's not done through me or Josh, that's done through the travel agency. So they handle it pretty much. And this is a great agency. They're all born-again Christians. It's not just a bottom line, we're in to make money. This is a ministry. And it goes back for 3 decades in their family. And I've used different tour groups over the years, but this is like the finest that we've used for the last 10 years. They're great people and have a real heart for ministry. Imagine tours. Yeah, Imagine, yeah. Any other questions?
There's a minimum amount of people before you...
20. Yeah, and I think we already have like 6 or 7, and we haven't even opened up the registration. So, yeah, 20 is the minimum with the airlines. And so I could be wrong, but I think we'll fill up again. And there's a lot of people from other states who've been calling for a year, like, when are you going next to Israel? Because they want to come. So I don't know. God knows. This is a little bit different in terms of the quirkiness of having a major war there. But fortunately, things have really turned around. And so we're thankful for that. So there's usually 2 tears in that the airlines won't take a whole group of 60 on the same flight. So there might be like there's 30 on one flight and 30 on one flight, and one could go through Miami to Tel Aviv, or one could go to New York to Tel Aviv, or from Savannah to Washington to Tel Aviv. So they haven't finalized that, but that will be approaching. So it works out. The hardest part is getting there. That's why I always tell people the hardest part is getting there. And if you haven't traveled before internationally, there's all the jet lag and everything. But once you get there, it's so exciting because you're there. And the trip back is so much easier. It's so far. It's easier to go from east to west than west to east. So it is a little taxing, but you'll get there. You're going to be in like premier hotels the whole time. They're beautiful. The food is superb. It's just a lot of fun, and it's very enjoyable, and it's very well done. Other questions?
What about backpacks?
Backpacks? Fanny packs are okay. Backpacks you can have with you during the day, but you leave them in the bus. And the bus is secure the whole time. So I bring a backpack with me, and the only thing I take when I leave the bus is my Bible. And a few places that are super windy, I'll bring an iPad because I've ruined too many Bibles in Israel with the wind blowing and all the rest. Most people carry a backpack with them during the day. In fact, Imagine Tours will even give you a kind of a sack of sorts that you can use or not use. But backpacks are very, very nice to travel with during the day. You can have all your stuff in it. Yes?
I don't know if I need to call the travel company, but like for health insurance, if there was a medical...
Yeah, it depends on your personal carrier, which is they're going to ask you. Like I have United Healthcare, and they cover me in Israel. So it's not like I need to get some special policy. You might be with an insurance company that doesn't cover you in Israel. So that would begin with that personal carrier, and then you kind of go from there. And if you call Imagine Tours, they probably know which ones. I mean, this is what they do. Oh, you're with Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm so sorry. No, I think Blue Cross is actually probably, they'd cover it. They're a pretty big outfit, so I'm sorry. I already put some people in shock, so. Anyway, anybody else?
We just handle everything through the registration.
That's right. Everything's done through Imagine Tours. Just go on the site, and it's just straightforward. But if you have questions, Pastor Josh will respond to any questions that you have. What is not? No visa needed. No, you've traveled quite a bit, and in a lot of countries it's necessary, but not with Israel and the U.S. have this open field relationship, and so no visa required. You do need to have a passport, and you need to make sure that your passport doesn't expire within 6 months of the travel. And so, like if you have a passport and it expires 3 months after you come back from Israel, then it's considered outdated. And that's true with most international travel, not every country, but it's true with Israel. So check your passport, see when it expires, and it might be that you need to update it. And this would be the time to do it. You don't want to wait to the last minute, especially if there's some government shutdown, and though I don't expect that, but we had a trip once where there was a government shutdown. You couldn't get passports for like 3 months. So it was kind of edgy for some people. But there shouldn't be a problem. And Imagine we'll ask you for a copy of the front 2 pages of your passport. Why do they do that? In case you lose it. And so we've been doing the same thing with student trips for 3 decades. When we started taking students, and I think of this one student, 2 different trips, he lost his passport both times. This is like not in his favor. But we had a Xerox copy of the front 2 pages, and the airlines accepted it. Otherwise, you got to go to your local embassy, and you're there 2 or 3 days. But it worked out great. Yeah.
What about vaccines?
Vaccines, there's none that are necessary now. Now, on our last trip, we had COVID, which I've never even had a flu shot. But I did get the COVID because I was planning to go to China, and then China said no. They shut us down. I was supposed to go and do a conference for 4,000 Chinese pastors, and can't go. And it's basically closed off now, China, in a friendly way to Americans. But I'm going to go to, so I got the 2 shots. But I got the Pfizer. So why did I get the Pfizer? Well, I know, but I figured the Jewish people developed the Pfizer, and every Jew in Israel got the Pfizer shot. They had like 100% inoculation and whatever. And I figured, well, I know the Jews can't be wiped out. So if I'm going to choose a vaccine, I think I'll go with the Pfizer. So that was my rationale. And by God's grace, I don't think I have any side effects, but anyway, but there's no vaccines necessary. And if you ask me if we had another COVID thing, I'd say, let me tell you what you can do with that shot. I don't think I'd get one again. But anyway, especially, my son is a Marine officer, and some of these guys that he's met, they've had all these side effects and heart problems, and kind of sad. But so life goes, right? That's why we need to be ready for heaven. Anybody else? Well, you're going to have other questions, and like I say, we'll have an informational meeting as we approach the date where you'll get, your tickets, your electronic tickets, a little tour guide book, and we'll send out things in advance, like in terms of clothing, like how do you pack and things like that, and 10 days, let's see, I need 15 pieces of underwear, and this is the time to clean out the old underwear, and I'll take the ratty stuff and I'll throw it away in the wastebasket at the end of the day. And Joe, there's some kind of cult up there on the 4th floor. They all throw away their underwear at the end of the day, And so, anyway, so... But you can pack very light, and I'll tell you a story that has nothing to do with Israel, but my son, one of my sons, Jeremy, he lives in the D.C. area, and he worked in Cheney's office. Cheney kind of went south, but he was in Cheney's office, and he had this other guy who did a lot of the forerunning for President Bush, W. Bush. And so he would go and he would take a suitcase with clothes, and in every place he went, he just threw away the clothes. And when he came home with basically nothing. He said, that's how I got rid of my old clothes. And sometimes he said, I'll just leave it there for the maid or someone, and they'll enjoy the clothes. And that's how he cleaned out his closet. And you probably have shirts in your closet you haven't worn in 10 years, huh? Well, I'm telling you, now's the time to get rid of them. Now, you may look a little outdated out there, but that's okay. All right. Our Father, thank you that a man plans his ways, but you direct our steps. And maybe there's people here, those who are live streaming, those who will listen to this after, that you want them to go. So guide us and direct us, and thank you that we even have a chance at this time in human history to go to places where in a new and a fresh way the Bible can become very much alive. And we'll give you thanks for that in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. And so I'll say I'll be teaching at every spot that we go to. So you'll need a Bible or an electronic Bible, whatever you're comfortable with, but we'll be teaching at every spot that you go to. So anyway, good. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Yeah.